Hosted by Ed Steer and Dan Bolter, Life in Digital explores the ever-changing media landscape with today's industry leaders.
So Ken, welcome to the Life in Digital podcast.
Thank you, Dan.
It's so great
to be here.
Yeah, great, especially with the horrible snowy weather here in New York. So I appreciate you making the journey, and thank you for that.
Yeah, spring can't come soon enough with this.
Tell me about it, right? Tell me about it. So I guess to introduce myself, so of course I'm Dan, VP North America here at Sphere Digital. And it'd be great, Ken, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, of course, but then giving us a little bit of an insight in terms of your career journey and obviously what's brought you to Dianomi.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks again for having me. It's always great to chat with you, but excited to do this. So I'm Ken Johnston, the global head of sales for Dianomi. And I've been in this role for about 2 years currently. And as you and I have chatted about, I officially pulled a boomerang. So it's my second stint with Dianomi, which has been fun so far. So I had first joined the company back in about 2010. And prior to that, I was at Google on their financial services ad sales team. So I'd been there about 4 years, and that was a fun journey as kind of my first foray into the world of digital advertising. Learned quite a bit there. I think it was my second week at the company. They called an all hands meeting and decided to tell us that they'd acquired a company called YouTube. And at the time, people were looking around like, why did we pay $1.6 billion for this? Thinking it ended up being a pretty good move in the long run. But in any event, so I went from Google to Dianomi. The founders, who were London-based, got in touch with me and said, hey, look, we think we've got an interesting offering. We're just in the UK right now. We think the US is a big market for us. Would you be interested in helping us, get off the ground there? So it was a really fun opportunity the first time around. Kind of showed up on day one, I like to say, with no supply and no demand. So we kind of had to build it all from scratch in building both publisher partnerships, advertiser partnerships. So, definitely a different sort of a challenge from a behemoth like Google.
Yeah, shock to the system, I'm sure.
Humbling in a lot of ways. People would take your call one week, the next week don't have time to talk to you anymore. Sure. And that's, of course, a good learning experience in life. But I ended up kind of staying about 4 years at that point with Dianomi, and helped us get off the ground and scale the team a little bit here in the US. And at the time, programmatic was kind of becoming the big thing, and Dianomi didn't yet have programmatic capabilities. So I went to a company called Quantcast for a few years, joined their team on the kind of brand partnership side, and learned a lot about the programmatic world in doing that. And then went from there to Facebook/Meta, and actually joined up with my former boss when I was at Google, was at the time at Meta, it was still Facebook then. And I joined that team, and I was at Facebook Meta for about six and a half or so years. Largely on their financial services team. So, for one way or another, I've kind of been in the finance realm and digital world for most of my career. And I guess it's, maybe the New Yorker in me that I've always been fascinated by the intersection of Wall Street, not too far from where we are now, and Madison Avenue, even though not too many companies actually reside in either one of those places anymore. True. But I think just sort of the idea of, financial services and digital media, how those two things play together, I've been, for most of my career. So long story, somewhat shorter, I came back to Dianomi about 2 years ago now to be their global head of sales. And it's been great to see sort of how the company's evolved since my first stint there. Still not a huge team, but we're, just shy of 50 employees globally now. One big thing that happened while I was gone in 2021, the company listed publicly on the London Stock Exchange, the AIM market for sort of small, medium-sized companies. So it's been an interesting journey now being a public company, and you sort of realize some of the other stakeholders that you're also responsible to, being public, which again, different from a Meta and a Google, obviously really big public companies, but some similar challenges there, I would say. So that's sort of what's brought me back to Dianomi. And again, it's been really interesting to kind of see that company evolution and journey, and fortunate in that for all that's changed, many of the same people, including our CEO and co-founder, Rupert Hodson, are still there, and were frankly a big reason for my coming back. So a lot of great people who had helped to start the company are still very much a part of it today.
Yeah, amazing. And what an incredible journey, especially being part of that YouTube announcement at Google. That's amazing. And do you know what? Real testament to a great company culture and a great company product. If you can come back to it, I think that's really, really excellent to see that. So I guess on to Dianomi then. So tell us about Dianomi, obviously for those who aren't familiar with it.
Sure. I won't assume that it's the same kind of a household name as a Google or a Facebook.
Not yet.
Not yet. We're working on it. But Dianomi, it's actually the Greek word for distribution. So we think of ourselves as really a content distribution and amplification platform. And we've been primarily focused for our 20 plus years of being a company now, of specializing in the financial services and the premium lifestyle verticals, more specifically. So, through that, we currently partner with about 300 of the world's leading publishers, a lot of finance and business news sites like a Wall Street Journal, Reuters, CNN Business, etc. And we've also expanded to include some of the premium lifestyle publishers, your kind of Nat Geos, Condé Nasts of the world as well, some of the Hearst family.
Yeah.
So fortunate that we've got some great partnerships on the publisher side. And, we do a lot of one-to-one direct publisher partnerships with these companies. So we've got our code sitting on the pages of articles, homepages, et cetera, for these sites, where we've integrated our own native units there. And then on the advertiser side, which is, I guess, more where my team sits, again, fortunate to work with really a lot of the world's best brands in those categories.
Yeah.
So, Fortune 500 brands in the finance category, you're kind of JP Morgan Chase's, Bank of America's, Fidelity's, Charles Schwab's of the world. Wow. So really proud, I think, of both the publishers and the advertisers that we work with, even as a pretty small company.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know Dianomi has a great brand in the market. And I think it'd be useful to know, obviously not the only business within the native space in the market there.
Sure.
So what separates you guys out from the rest that are in the industry?
Yeah, it's definitely a really crowded space.
Yes.
Native and then just digital more broadly. I think at the end of the day, you're sort of all competing for those same ad dollars, right?
Yeah.
So I guess in the native ad space, we're often compared to bigger companies like Taboola and Outbrain. And I think from a technology standpoint, we do work in a similar fashion. We've got native units integrated on site, much of which is done on a pay-per-click basis.
Okay.
I think, again, where we try to differentiate and stand out is that more premium nature and focus, where we're not trying to be everything to everybody. We really try to specialize and hone in on that sort of higher end of the market, I guess you could say, both in terms of the publishers and the brands that we work with. Rupert, our CEO, likes to say, of 10 brands that approach us, we turn 8 of them down because we feel like they're just not up to our brand standards to be on the platform. We know certainly how important brand safety is in the categories that we work in. So we try to be super careful about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I guess it's about protecting the brand reputation, right? And I know you mentioned 300 publishers. That's a huge amount. Probably could be a hell of a lot more though, couldn't it? But it's about protecting that premium space.
For sure. Certainly have an appreciation for the scale that you can achieve. Going back to my kind of Google and Facebook days.
Yeah.
But, through our 300 publishers at Dianomi, we're able to reach over 500 million readers every single month around the globe. So it is very much a global platform. We're based in the UK, but we operate in markets all over the world. US is now actually our largest market. Probably about 80% of our business is from the US these days.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing. Well, it sounds incredible for sure.
It's been fun.
Yeah, I bet. so I guess obviously, look, we're within the industry, and certainly with obviously Dianomi playing the part in that. I guess what trends are you maybe seeing in marketing? I guess specifically for financial and luxury brands, your real core market.
Sure. I think in those markets, the trends that we're hearing about a lot are similar to the trends that you're probably hearing about broadly. Certainly, AI is top of mind for every marketer these days. How do they think about leveraging it in their content creation strategies, optimization strategies, what they put out in the marketplace? Influencers, certainly a big thing. Finfluencers or FinTalk in the world of financial services.
That's new to me. Okay,
it's kind of a fun one. And something I'd spent a bit of time on while I was at Facebook and Instagram, obviously a big place for kind of the influencer world. And luxury brands, I would say the same. A lot of consumers are getting advice and recommendations from people who look more like they do, who are kind of the same mindset, genres, versus kind of guys who might look more like me, older middle-aged white dudes in suits, giving you advice on where you should invest your money and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Hearing it more from a friend or a colleague or somebody who's a contemporary, I think is just a reality of the world.
Yeah.
I think about even just how, with two kind of tweenage daughters,
yeah,
how they sort of understand the world and consume media on a daily basis.
Yes.
I'm kind of mystified by their nightly skincare routines
Yes.
and how much of that is really done via Instagram and TikTok. And they now communicate with their friends about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I would have probably thought that strange even a few years ago that, you're going to kind of share your nightly skincare routine with like a bunch of people. But it's very much become like a cultural norm, I would say. So I think it translates probably across verticals, but we've definitely seen a bit of that in kind of the finance and the luxury worlds as well.
No, that's fantastic. I guess that finfluencer, one of my new favorite phrases now. That's amazing to hear about that. You touched at the start there, of course, AI being one of the biggest topics of conversation.
Yeah.
Is there any more information you could give there as to any trends you see on that side, how that may affect certainly the industry and where Dianomi plays a part there? Yeah,
it's interesting. I think some of our publisher partners, we know that they won't accept AI generated imagery on their sites as advertisements. And I think there's probably a few different reasons for that. I don't know that I fully understand all of them, but part of it I think goes back to trying to maintain a journalistic integrity on the site, and then everything that shows up on that site, even when it's recommended content, sponsored ads, etc. So, I think that's one of the things that is continuing to be navigated right now, and probably a little bit of a challenge, frankly, for us all to sort out. I wish I had kind of a magic bullet on that, but I think we're still trying to navigate it with everybody else. That being said, I think we are trying to figure out how do we leverage AI in some of our capabilities, not just optimization stuff that we can do for ads, but some of the insights that we can provide back, to brands and to publisher partners. So some interesting things that I think that we're starting to do in that realm. And, I would say other things that are trending definitely these days. CTV has kind of exploded, and I will admit that's not necessarily a world that we play in directly, but again, something that we're paying close attention to.
I'm sure.
And I think things like the understanding of what's happening with your ads, where are they showing up, brand safety are very much important in that realm, like they are on the sites that we partner with.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's really interesting for sure. And I guess kind of moving on from there then, so how do you see the balance maybe between brand awareness and, of course, performance marketing shifting maybe over the coming months, years? Like, what are your thoughts there?
It's a good question. I think when I think of a category like financial services, even again, going back to sort of the big tech days of Google and Meta, I think oftentimes that vertical is thought of as kind of your bottom funnel. It's all about direct response. And the challenge was, how do you help these brands move further up the funnel in terms of driving brand awareness? There's that kind of always thought about sea of sameness where, every brand out there asking you to invest money with them is talking about safety. They're sort of tried and true. We've been around for 100 years. They've usually got some kind of a boat or a ship weathering the storm, fitting on a day like today. And why they're the best, sort of bank to do that with, right? So how do you stand out like in a very crowded marketplace? We face this challenge as a tech company. I think finance brands face that. Luxury brands also face that. So, how do you stand out in that world? And if it's about driving that more upper funnel awareness, I think we're seeing brands figure out ways to leverage content as a way to do that. To sort of start the conversation earlier. Not necessarily asked to get married on the first date, but if I can provide you with some useful information that can make you think about, I hadn't really thought about investing in this way, or on the luxury side, when I'm planning my next family vacation, these are kind of helpful tips to help me do that if this is a place or a country I'm thinking about going to. And just being useful, right? Like providing content that helps somebody in making those decisions. I think brands are starting to understand the value of doing that. So showing up in places where they can just provide some of that useful, thought-provoking content before they get into kind of the harder sell messaging of, here's my product, buy it today kind of a thing. So I think moving further up the funnel, I would say, to go back to your question of where do we see that trending? It's probably
more on the brand
collapsing
marketing.
that a little bit, I think, and again, moving further up funnel.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. As everyone wants, the direct response, everyone wants the purchases, right? But focusing more on the brand and create that and focus there first seems to be more of your advice there, right?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Well, that's really interesting. And I guess maybe more on that, like what extra advice maybe would you give then to brands who are, of course, looking to refine their digital advertising strategies?
Yeah. I'm not sure I'm the best guy to give this advice, but I would say, just to the brands and the marketers that we partner with, there's always going to be that next shiny object out there. Definitely saw a lot of this at Facebook, where it was, we had brands who wanted to come in and have a meeting to talk about their metaverse strategy. And that was all great and exciting and kind of that new shiny object, but they weren't doing the basic blocking and tackling that would ultimately drive their business every day on a platform as big as Facebook and Instagram. Yeah. So, there's always going to be that, I think, lure of the next shiny object, and whether that be AI, if it's influencers, if it's the metaverse, if it's whatever the next thing is going to be. It's great to stay up and in tune on that stuff, but don't forget about the things that are ultimately going to drive your business. Yeah. So they're not as always sexy and exciting maybe, but I would just recommend that don't lose sight of kind of those fundamental building blocks for the business drivers. And you may have think, oh, hey, I ticked off the box on my search or display or native programmatic strategies 5 years ago, and I'm kind of on to the next thing. But you can't forget about that stuff. You've got to constantly go back and revisit it and make sure that it is driving the results that you want it to drive for your business. Hold all those partners accountable, I would say. It's again, easy in such a fast-paced world to sort of take somebody's word for it. And I think the smartest marketers and the ones I'm always really impressed by are the ones who can take the time with their teams to really dig into the data and understand, what is this partner doing for my business? What kind of value are they ultimately driving? In a world that is increasingly not just AI driven, but programmatic, when you think about, a dollar that you put in at the top of that funnel, how much is ultimately coming out at the bottom versus how much is getting siphoned off in fees and through different partners and exchanges. How hard is that dollar working for you basically? So it's an easy thing to sort of move on from, but I think taking the time to kind of dig in there and understand how hard your marketing dollars are working, it's really important.
Sure, yeah, really looking into the data.
Yeah,
no, for sure. And it's I know you say maybe not the best person to give advice. I'd beg to differ with your experience. I think you got some great advice there, and maybe more focused on you. Obviously, you've had an incredible career journey from where you've been and where you are now. I guess personally, what's the best professional advice that you've received then that maybe you could share with me and certainly our listeners?
Sure. Best professional advice. I've been fortunate to have had some amazing mentors and bosses through my career in the various stops I've made. So I've received through that a lot of great advice. But honestly, and this one might sound a little bit simple, I think the best career advice is probably also just the best life advice that I've ever gotten. And I probably first got it from my mom when I was about 7 years old. And that is just never burn bridges.
Yeah.
Right? And that, again, probably sounds simple, but I think people do it more than they should. And I'd again like to think that I'm somebody who's an example of that in coming back to a company that I worked at a number of years ago, who could have easily moved on from me, just staying in touch and coming back to those places. The world of whether it be finance or digital advertising or luxury retail, they're smaller than you think, right? And somebody who might be a colleague today could be your client tomorrow or prospective client. And you want to make sure that you haven't done anything to jeopardize those relationships along the way. So, that's just, I think, advice that I constantly come back to myself.
Yeah, and I think you're so right. I mean, it's advice that we preach as well within recruitment, right? Yeah. It is a small space that you work in, that I work in, and treating people with kindness irrespective of the situation. I think these things always come back, don't they? They will always be there, and people they value that, I think, don't they? So I think that's great.
I was going to ask you, Dan, as somebody who probably has to give that kind of advice on a daily basis.
Yeah,
I'm always open to good tips. Any advice that you've received that's been most meaningful to you or that you give out?
I think it's thinking bigger picture for a lot of things. I think we're very focused sometimes on what's here and now, what interviews are we having, what clients are we working with, what deals can we move over the line. And I think sometimes smaller picture thinking can be a good thing, and urgency can be great. But I think being patient and thinking bigger picture, certainly for us, what's best for our clients in the long run, I think always comes back and pays dividends, right? And
for sure.
And I think when you're in a relationship focused business like you are and I am, not burning bridges and thinking more long term, I think is probably some of the best advice I'd add to that, right?
For sure. I think that's great advice too.
Yeah, this is
definitely going to borrow that.
There you go.
Thank you.
No problem. I wasn't expecting that. That was great. But anyway, so look, I guess it's been great, obviously, finding out about you, finding out about Dianomi. But I think maybe a good thing to sort of leave it on here for our listeners is, it's always good to look forward now. So what is it that's next for Dianomi, in terms of growth, innovation? Sure. What's on the cards?
Yeah. I think a few things, maybe three things that I would say that I'm most excited about this year for Dianomi. The first would be just new creative formats. Yeah. So people probably still think of us most often in the native space, and that's very much our bread and butter, but expanding to all other formats, whether it be display, video, certainly. I think I alluded to the CTV world, running that same sort of video content across the publisher partners that we work with has become a bigger part of the strategy. Podcasts, actually, like this one, right? Yeah. Podcasts we see as an increasingly popular way to just consume content. I find myself listening to way more podcasts than any other way that I get my information on a daily basis. Yeah. It's the kind of thing that you can do even while multitasking. Sure. So we see a lot of the brands that we work with producing their own podcast content. So helping them and having that content be found more easily. Yeah. And driving subscribers, listeners, those kinds of things. And then one that I'm particularly excited about, which ties together like a few of those other formats, we call, maybe not super creatively, but the content hub. So imagine a unit that you could own fully where you can have video with display or with native units. You can even ask a question to your audience to pull them and drive engagement that way. So I think that, again, just helps to stand out a little bit as that sort of a higher impact unit. So creative formats, definitely something that we're excited about. Cool. Apple News is a partner of ours. We've got a new longer form advertorial capability, which I think, again, for these brands really looking to build that awareness and consideration, that's a really powerful way to do that for some of those luxury partners that we work with. And then I think the second thing I would say would be some of the new insights that we're helping to drive for partners. So I think given where we kind of sit in this digital ecosystem, we've got a pretty interesting view as to news consumption that happens every single day kind of around the globe. So being able to tell a brand, how is your brand being written about in the news, but also then what's being read most often about your brand. You might be out there writing great content and promoting things like what we're doing in the sustainability space. But if your CEO has said something that's generated 10 times the number of views and watches, it's important to know that, right? As a brand. And then how are you stacking up relative to all of your peers and competitors in the marketplace? How often are you being read versus, the other brands that you're out there competing for attention against? So driving those kinds of insights, I think are pretty cool. We think kind of unique to what we can deliver in terms of the way that we can show that versus a lot of the other platforms that have this sort of listening, I guess, capability. Sure. So it's early days for us there, but I think there's a lot of potential. So that's an exciting one. And I think the last one for us is just, continuing to build and grow out our team. So, and you guys have been an amazing partner in helping us do that. And, as we look to increase our foothold in some of the luxury categories that we're tapping into, finding folks who can help us do that. Salespeople, account managers, others on the product side. So, we're a small but mighty team. Again, not even 50 people, but adding a few more, I think can definitely help us get there. Yeah, well, what amazing brands to be working with as a team of 50. So, the achievement's been amazing. Thank you. Well, look, thank you. It's been such a pleasure to speak to you, Ken, find out more about your career journey, but Dianomi too. So thank you for joining us. I really do appreciate it. Thanks. And of course, been a lot of fun. Yeah, no problem. And I guess on the podcast note, I know you're hoping to start your own. I would really encourage you to do so. Yes, we need to do that this year for sure. Well, if our listeners want to find out any more, we'll direct them where to go for Dianomi, but keep an eye out for that podcast, eh? For sure. All right. Well, thank you very much, Ken. Thanks a lot, Dan.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Life in Digital. If you want to know more about our guest or any of the topics that we covered today, you can find out more in our show notes and on our website.